talked about the angels of Atlantis almost ad infinitum over the last 2 years, that they've emerged very fully from their nest in many ways. For most of you know that the angels came to me in 1987 during a very unique astrological portal known as the Harmonic Convergence. So there I was, the story goes, in Glastonbury, minding my own business, reading for people, because I'd worked as an intuitive for about 30 years. And so I felt fatigued, so I simply went off to the tour, surrounded by thousands of other people who were there for the Harmonic Convergence. Are you familiar with what the Harmonic Convergence was? Some yes and some no. Okay, so it was this very unique astrological portal that opened in the heavens. A grand trine opened, and it was suggested by the Mayan civilization that 144,000 rainbow-like warriors were awakened, were literally ignited on a cellular level to begin light workership that would be a 25-year journey through to this point. Intriguing, huh? So many of us were actually woken at that time. I was a young man then, and now I've grown and matured and advanced in years, and hopefully a little bit of wisdom has been instilled upon me. So there I was sitting on the tour, and as I meditated surrounded by many people, suddenly I heard 12 harmonics. Now that's not that unusual for me, because I've been surrounded by supernatural sound ever since I was a child, because as a child I found it very difficult to do the sorts of things that we normally do when we're children, in the sense of being educated and learning certain skills. For example, I found it very difficult to read, and one of the reasons being that actually as soon as I looked at the printed word, the written word, I saw the word as sound. Now fortunately, as I grew, when I was around 11, 12, 13 years of age, my mother had the inspiration to put me into a church choir, and by singing, that's how I learned to read. But at the same time, seeing sound, this is something called synesthesia, it's a crossover of the senses, that seeing sound means that you actually begin to see what sound really does. Now we know that we can see what sound does in relation to somebody else, because we can see that they're moved by an emission of sound, by a vibration, or we can see that they feel very thwarted by it, whether it's moved in terms of elevation or they're actually taken down. So that was really quite surprising to witness, because I was actually able to see the interaction of people's souls, the interaction of people's physiology in relation to the way that we speak. I mean, did you know, for example, that sound is at the core of creation? Did you know, therefore, that you have within you a note which is your sound of creation? So a few people nodding.
I know about that.
Okay, you know about
I know about that, yeah.
because you're a sound expert. You're a musician. But a lot of us lay people who aren't necessarily tuning into the sophistication of music, we don't know these things. So there I was, sitting on Glastonbury tour, surrounded by these very unique sounds that we're beginning to realize more and more are harmonic portals, transcendental portals, into other worlds of experience beyond these three dimensions that we exist through. And in hearing these sounds, I then opened my eyes and saw 12 orbs in front of me that were all brightly lit, different colours. And I heard, we are the angels of Atlantis, and we're going to provide you with a temple of sound healing known as the alchemy of voice. And you will be creating this just as you had in ancient Atlantis and in Egypt, where sound was actually used to reharmonize people when they were out of harmony. That is in its simplicity. Now what's grown over the years is the fact that these angels have become stronger and stronger and stronger in our midst, because we are literally inviting them into our beings. And that's really what the immersion and the emergence of this book is all about. It's an emergency, that we see a way of feeling these extraordinary supernatural beings coming into our lives. Why is that important? Well, if we look at our history and we go back into the latter part of the 19th century, we realized at that time that something very specifically acute was needed for the growth of our peoples. We were about to experience a diversification of what Europe was all about, which led towards two great wars. And at that time, several amazing people stepped forward from our midst that gave us information about the fact that we needed to become more acutely aware of who we were as we gave birth to ourselves in the face of a system known as the patriarchal system that we were actually giving our power away to. I'm specifically referring to two very acute people, one of whom was an Atlantean pre-scientist, reincarnated, and those two people are Freud and Carl Jung. Now, Carl Jung, I'm taught, was the person that was a re-evocation of the Atlantean energies. And what he gave us was, he gave us many things, but what he gave us basically was an understanding, a testament of how we could begin to develop our individuation process. That means that we literally find a way, physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually, of convening our own power and sitting and living and vibrating through our own sovereignty. Now, sound is at the very core of that, because if we actually find the note that we are, if we find the song of our soul, we automatically begin to find that harmony that leads towards our sovereignty. So as a collective, we all began a journey towards finding what our power meant in the world. And we've now reached this point, all of these, this century later, where we're beginning to realize that we have understood a little bit about who we are. We've healed some of the lesions that we have grown with, that we have reincarnated with. We've begun to define what our karma is. Now, what else is there? What else is there is that as we begin to see who we are, we begin to realize that we are not living in separation. We are beginning to realize that we're living in interconnectivity, in the power of our own process, in the power of our own strength, in the essence of our own sovereignty. And where do we go when we actually begin to feel ourselves working interconnectively with the whole of nature? So there's some of the big questions that we're beginning to ask of ourselves. As we move forward, we see that the diversity that we're experiencing needs an extra touch. And so where do you go when you feel that your diversity has reached a point where you no longer feel yourself to be in harmony? What do you reach for? I mean, that's a question to you. What do you reach for? Spirit. Exactly. What else is there? So we reach for some level of supercoherence with the divine. And then we begin to realize that there are many ministers of grace, there are many angels or spiritual beings, ascended masters, that we can call upon to assist us as we move from separation into interconnectivity. Now, what's special about these angels that I'm talking about, and that I've written this book, which is doing very well, thank you very much, and you're here to celebrate this evening. What's special about these angels is that we all know them as individuals. We know who Michael is, we know who Raphael is, we know who Metatron is, and if not, then please just acquire a book after this particular introduction, and you will soon learn who Metatron or who Sandalphon is. But what's unique about these beings is that they come forward into a holy communion that allows us to feel very specifically how we can move into a more fervent communion with the divine, with spirit. As they do this, they bring with them this extraordinary testament of information about how they once were in existence during a civilization that existed before, possibly before this great civilization that we're living now, which finished 15,000 years ago, we are led to believe, and that is the civilization of Atlantis. So the rough chronology of Atlantis was from 250,000 BC through to 15,000 BC. The way that we lived our lives then was from an acute point of supercoherence, where we had 12 chakras open, where we were literally living a 12 helix DNA. So we had very easy connection with that we refer to today as being spirit or angelic or divine or ascended master. as we go through this time of great change, as we go through this great shifting point, this information is coming so that we can return to that remembrance, so that we can return to what is most special about we people as Homo sapiens. That we are human, we are spiritual beings on a human journey, and that what most of us wish to do is to evolve so that we can actually become the ascended beings that we wish. And there's a lot of information around today about how we can do that in relation to the promise of the fifth dimension. So, the angels come literally to drench our lives with their wisdom. The angels come as messengers from the divine to allow us to become more richly embodied as Homo sapiens, or spiritual beings on a human journey. They come to allow us to understand what the essential parts of our being are or is. They come to bring us information about the fact that our souls need to become more fully embodied within us, so that in turn we wake to the fact that we are actually universal beings, not these parochial or localized beings that just exist on this planet, but that we actually have a testament or a prophecy, a divine inheritance within us that can allow us to define who we are here and now, but at the same time recognize that we are divine beings moving on an escalated, accelerated pathway of discovery. So how do we go about that? Well, we begin to realize that our souls literally sit right in the middle of our beings, or if you like, that we in the middle of our beings are literally bathed in soul. And when we begin to recognize what that is all about, we begin to see and feel and experience fully that our soul sits within our heart, and the heart, therefore, is the seat of the soul. What they evince very specifically is the fact that when we sit in the heart, we literally sing the song of our soul. So how's it going? Are you really singing the song of your soul? Well, we're trying, yes?
We're trying.
I can see, we're trying. I can see people go, oh, there are moments of recognition.
Yes.
I see flickers, shimmerings in your body. Trying to find a way of singing the song of our soul. At this point, if we weren't actually in a busy bookshop, I would say, well, why don't we chant and find the song of your soul? But I think that probably would not necessarily be entertainable for those wonderful people over there who want to quietly buy their books. Because we all know what it's like when we walk into a bookshop, and particularly a bookshop as wonderfully intense as this. You want to spend time in silence. So, the other unique thing that I wanted to share with you about our journey through this process of developing a strength within our own individuation process, but also moving into non-separation, is the fact that these angels give us very specific keys, that they show us what their lineage was as they grown, matured and evolved over the millennia. They bring to us a series of keys that we evoke in relation to 20th century psychology through the notion of archetypes. So the archetypes are actually literally keys into our consciousness whereby we can fully understand those bits of ourselves that we need to draw back into harmony from separation. The archetypes that step forward are archetypes such as the sacred lover. So how is your sacred loving? The warrior. How is your warrior stance? Warrior stance means that we develop determination, we develop steadfastness, we develop enthusiasm, we develop courage, we develop loyalty, and we develop the bravery that is necessary to keep going through this process of accelerated behavior. There is the great messenger in the form of Gabriel, who brings us oracular information when we most need it. You know, a number of you in meeting you this evening said, I've had the most extraordinary day that has led me here. You mentioned that these amazing moments of synchronicity that have literally led you into this space. And these moments of synchronicity we see as being great magics, don't we? We see them as being illuminating functions of what our lives can truly be about when we see ourselves as being non-separated people. Because automatically we connect with the source. And the source is an infinitely unfolding creative possibility full of love and full of joy. You see, there is no exclusivity, there is no separation. It is completely inclusive. And then the archetypes go on into the great guide, the great guardian. I've mentioned the great lover, the great teacher, the great leader. All of these archetypal forces that we need to awaken within ourselves when we're feeling that perhaps these unnavigable or newly navigable waters are rather difficult to take us through. So the work in simplicity is doing extraordinarily well. This book was preceded by an amazing oracle which has not been in existence for 15,000 years, which they gave me through channeled source. I worked with a superb illustrator, and we created this deck of cards, this oracle, which at the moment is being translated into Russian, Norwegian, Spanish, Italian, French, Croatian, Slovenian. In other words, it's captured people's attention. It's captured people's imagination. This, I would suggest, goes very keenly with the book, because what it does is it brings in the whole nature of the way that we can open up that very special facility that we have to move into the sixth sense, to move beyond 3D, weight, space and time, into a union of what we're truly about in terms of the supernalness of our soul. As I was given about 10 minutes to speak, I think probably I need to ask for questions. I want you to see that this is a conversation. Hey, come in, you wonderful people, come in, come in. Come, 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 come. A man to draw them in. Are there any questions? Would you like to ask any questions?
Is your sound the same as chakra sound?
A moment ago I was talking about finding the song of our soul. When we find the song of our soul, I believe that all the chakras come together into a slipstream of harmony. Now what's interesting within the Temple of Sound Healing, known as the Alchemy of Voice, is that our first quest is to find what our note is, to find the song of our soul. And in finding it, or in the journey of trying to find it, we recognize that we're not actually living it. And so we move into the second pillar, which is a definition of why we're not living it. And that's when we begin to go into our chakra and recognize that our chakra are actually not spinning with as much freedom or as much velocity as they could. And so we use sound to move into each of the chakra to bring them into harmony. So, yeah? Sorry?
Chakras themselves have Sanskrit sound.
Yeah, exactly. So we find those sounds. Well, not just in Sanskrit, in every single tonal language. Yeah. So what we do is we go into the universal language of sound that crystallizes intention, but not necessarily from the derivative of a cultural identity. We just see ourselves as being open to the possibility of the multidimensionalness of what we're about as human beings. Now the other point that I wanted to share with you, what's remarkable about the discovery of the fact that when we have lesions, when we have pollutions, when we have negativity in our body that leads to dis-ease, whether that's physical, emotional, mental or spiritual, or the holistic nature of that, by going into a definition of where the issue is held within our body, it could be grief, it could be fear, it could be I've got cancer. All of these possibilities are states that I work with sound. That we define where the holding is, and as soon as that holding has been defined and we sound into the chakra point that is in association with the holding, it begins to actually loosen. People go through supernatural healing. And then we begin to see at the same time that when we open to the totality of what our chakra system is all about. And I'm working through the Alchemy of Voice in developing an appreciation of all 12 chakras, that when we bring them together, transcendental corridors of light are opened between these 3 dimensions and the other dimensions that exist, that I believe are 12. That's my teaching. 12 is a very significant number in all of this, which is part of the information that I wanted to share this evening, that there are 12 angels of Atlantis, 12 chakras, there are 12 zodiacal sounds, there are 12 months in the year, there are 12 planets in our immediate universe. And the reason why 12 comes in as significant is that the number 12 is the vibration of universal harmony. Interesting! Ah! So that's why there are 12. And of course that's just the beginning. I mean, I'm just scratching the surface. The book will reveal to you even more information about some of the more fervent aspects of how the numerology of 12 has significance that reverberates through resonances way off into the further reaches of the cosmos. So yes, so the chakras are really, really important. I don't have them here, but there's a wonderful CD that I made called Initiation, which is a whole sound ritual, sonic meditation, into opening up specifically the 8 chakras that we work on to begin our process, up to the 8th, which is the first transpersonal. And that's the chakra of the universal heart that opened very specifically about 3 years ago in many of us in our collective, and then was charged by 11-11-11. So we step forward more fervently.